like when the music fades out, it's like we just came right in the middle of your conversation, and there's no editing with that. I literally just hit the record button, and we start.
And that's what's most personal about this. And I listened to a bunch of different podcasts.
Right.
And what struck me about yours is that it's so personal. I mean, you're not just having friends and family. You're not just talking about your life. You're not just showing the topless pictures of yourself on the internet.
Yes.
But it comes at a very personal voice. You're not necessarily talking about one subject matter,
yes,
or one thematic topic. It's not politics. It's just everything. Variety.
I've been criticized. People say, I think you're doing it wrong. I think if you focused on one centralized thing, your podcast would be heard by so many people. Like, believe it or not, it's not. I mean, it's not heard by like a large group of people. I mean, we're honestly, this is the most honest I've ever been. I mean, it's heard by hundreds. And I don't take that lightly. Like,
no, that's got to be humbling.
Hundreds of people listening to this, I love that. I love it. But back in the day, the old philosophy of podcasts was inflate your numbers. It's like, oh, yeah, we're heard by tens of thousands, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this is reality. I mean, hundreds of people listen, and I love that. I mean, I absolutely love that. What I wanted to ask you was... This is kind of weird. This kind of caught me off guard a little bit. You had sent me a Facebook message. I want to say it had to be over the summer, and you had said, maybe it was on Twitter, but I feel like it was Facebook Messenger. And you said to me, "Hey, I just heard one of your podcasts," and you said something to the effect of, and I'm just paraphrasing, like, "I'm hooked. This is great," something to that effect. And you're like, I went back and listened to every single one. And this caught me off guard for a number of reasons. People have told me before that, oh, I love your podcast. I've heard a few of them. I really enjoy it. I don't know that I've ever had many people say that, oh, I went back and I had to go and listen to every single one of them. But then also to that, when it comes to family, and I kind of have an interesting relationship with family because in a lot of aspects, I'm terrible. As good as I am communicating on a podcast or social media, when it comes to interacting, keeping in touch with people, I am just god awful. And that's just me just being as honest and as real as I can be. And I've told people this, and I've apologized many times to people that, I'm sorry that I'm just so terrible with keeping in touch. And I think... I certainly didn't get it from my mother because I think she's pretty good with keeping in touch with people. Probably so much more my father because he's not so good at keeping in touch. And at some point, I'm going to let this audience in on that story. I think one day it's going to be addressed. But so to have somebody from the family come to me and say, I've listened to your podcast, and maybe there are family members that have heard it. And maybe they just don't say or speak about it. Because I think this happens a lot in many things. People hear something, whether it's good or bad, and you just don't know that they've heard it. They don't tell you that they've heard it. And this is not a, please come and tell me how many things you've listened to.
No.
No, but it's more of something of, you really caught me off guard in a very good way. And you were like, man, I love this podcast. And you're like probably the first family that's come to me and said, I've listened to your podcast and I love this. And that really touched me. Huge.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Your words meant a lot to me. And so what I kind of want to figure out is like, number one, how did we get here in a sense of, because, our communication level has increased drastically in this year. You got married. I definitely want to talk about that. We started kind of talking again this year. We've kind of had like off and on, and we'll touch on that as well. But how did we get here in the sense of, how do you hear my podcast? What draws you in? How are we here?
So I'll go at a very macro level, just talking about myself for a bit.
Please.
And
that's why we're here.
And some of this is going to be familiar to you, being my cousin, knowing that our family is not ostentatiously large.
Right.
That's my characterization. when compared to other folks' family. Just talking about myself, my mom is one of three.
Yes.
My uncle did not marry and does not have children of his own.
Correct.
My aunt has two cousins, both not in our immediate area, but who I've seen periodically growing up. A big age difference there, though.
Right.
My dad, an only child.
Yeah.
And so I know, and with some of his family being upstate New York, a little bit in Maryland that I've reconnected with recently.
Right.
Getting older.
Yes.
Seeing your family, knowing that family is important. You and I have lost some very important people in the past 5, 10, 15 years. And so those family ties have gotten more important for me.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, there's a lot of darkness out in the world.
Yeah, it's true.
And with my work in city planning,
yes,
a lot of and we as a profession, we have a hard time marketing ourselves. Compare me to a police officer.
Okay.
The police officer can easily go to the community, to the politicians and say, we catch the bad guys.
Yes.
We're going after the bad guys. And the community says, we need you. And think of the public works folks, your engineers, your water treatment experts. We're providing you safe drinking water. We're getting, when you flush the toilet, we get it far away. We treat it so it doesn't hurt the environment. Folks say, we need you too.
Yes.
And so for those of us who are working on affordable housing, who are helping out the transportation system, things that are slow and incremental and not immediate, and as a profession get very jargony, we're not as good at articulating what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, gosh, where was I going with all this?
We're talking about how we got here,
how we got
here,
here,
the podcast,
yeah,
everything. We're tying it all together, brother. And by the way, can I just sidebar super quick? When we say cousins, like in a traditional sense, we're probably several layers of cousin removed. But as far as I see it, and I don't know how you feel about this, like when I just say cousin, like you're just my cousin, like I don't give a shit if it's third, fourth, fifth, sixth, removed, whatever.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I just feel like you're my cousin. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel about it. So I just wanted to clarify that to the people.
I got back to where we were going. I talked about the darkness and how a lot of those things, we hear things about water systems in Flint, Michigan, breaking down. We have a bunch of local governments. I've worked in local government for over 10 years now.
Right.
Local governments having trouble balancing their budget, going broke. The federal level is such an anomaly because they can just borrow more money. They can just keep the lights on by borrowing, and on our state and local folks, they can't do that. And so there's a lot of folks out there trying to keep communities going, and it can be very grim sometimes. And so where do you find the light in the world?
Yes.
Where do you find a happy lining? Where do you get your happiness from? Where when on a daily basis you're dealing with some very challenging things, having to educate people on a lot of tough stuff, and just giving a lot of bad news. I want to put my shed next to my fence. Well, our laws say you're not allowed to do that. Yeah. Or I'm trying to make my mortgage payments, and so I rented out my basement to a college roommate of mine, and it's been helping me make my mortgage payment. Well, we have laws that say you can't rent out your basement. Yeah. And so you're getting these flabbergasted looks, and all you can do if you're a public sector employee, you're just explaining, here's what they're going for. Here's why they wrote these laws. Yep. I didn't necessarily write the laws, but at the same time,
you're like the messenger man, essentially.
I'm the messenger.
Don't shoot the messenger.
I wear the black hat. Yeah, and it's tough wearing that black hat sometime. And so
I can imagine.
Coming back to it, my family is small. Yes. I have someone who I'm seeing on social media have a lot of success.
Okay.
And someone like you, Gary, who's bringing who has had failures in the past.
Oh my God.
And you get the mental discipline, which is what it comes down to, I think. The mental discipline to say, okay, I've got a goal in mind. How am I going to get there? How am I going to stick to it? How am I going to take an incremental approach?
Right.
I'm gonna this is fun. I've done the shakes.
Yeah.
I've done the belly belts, and
Yes.
I've done the fads and the finicky stuff.
Yes.
And those quick fixes, much like in many environments, they don't work.
Yeah. Band-Aids wear off at some point. They have to fall off your skin at some point.
And so seeing you get that progress, it's great to see personal success. It's great to see family success. And,
Thank you.
And I wanted to show that support.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to show that support and say, hey, this is being noticed. We notice. We know what's going on. This is remarkable. And it needs those words of affirmation have to come your way because it's too important otherwise.
I do appreciate that. I decided in earlier this year, the very beginning of the journey, that I was going to document everything, and on a public level. I mean, my Instagram, which is where I'm probably most active, that's where I've gained most of my community. Was private for many years, just for a habit. Like my Facebook is locked down like Fort Knox. I don't use it a whole lot anymore, honestly. I really don't. I don't even know why it is. I probably should just open it because there's nothing there. There's nothing sensitive. I just don't use it. But my Instagram in January, I decided to open it wide open. I follow a guy also named Gary Vaynerchuk. Huge inspiration. Talks about document over create. Talks about documenting aspects of your life and how there's so much value in, people, they want to come along for a ride. They want to come along for a journey. So when you document and you create all this content centered around your journey, there's a lot of attention that can come along with that. It's not just attention. It's more about what kind of value can you give to people. And so that's what I've learned is giving so much value. For the amount of people that write me on a daily basis and tell me, I've seen your journey. This has changed my life. You motivate me, you inspire me, etc. And I appreciate every single one of these messages. I could probably be running a $100,000 a year online coaching business if I wanted to. I could fully exploit these kind of things, but I don't do it because I just want to give value.
Yeah.
Because there have been many people who've given me value over the years and given me advice, given me support. And I always operate at a pay it forward type thing. That's what I do. It's always, how can I pay it forward? I spend so much time online every day, an hour or two a day, reaching out to complete strangers that I've never talked to before. And just
I love
sending them
that.
Positive vibes.
I love that.
I love it too because it makes somebody's day, because I know that when random people hit me up, it makes my day. So if I can make somebody else's day, I'm happy to do it. So I could be at $100,000, and that's probably on the entry level. I could be doing online coaching and consulting, life coaching, all this stuff. So many things I could do, but I don't do it because I just want to help people. So putting it all out there, being accountable, laying it all out. When I have a bad week, I say I had a bad week. Right now, I've been a little depressed because my wrist, I had gout in my wrist. I still have it in my wrist. I've not been into the gym in a whole week, and I talk about it every single day. I'm starting to post daily videos on my Instagram. In 2018, I'm going to go on YouTube and start a vlog again and talk more about that. So it's not just the good stuff. It's not just the topless pictures on the internet. Here's the before and the after. Like, here is Gary had a shitty week, and he's depressed. He's been eating a little bit more. I mean, I was on a podcast last night with this guy, Tony, who's made great progress. And people are listening now next week, and this is their last week's podcast. But I was talking very honestly and candidly with him about how I had been a little depressed because I've been injured. I haven't been working out. And about how I've not been watching my diet in the last week. I've not overdone it. You know, I peaked at the scale. But again, you could listen to any podcast in the last few months where I talk about the power of the scale is too much. We shouldn't put a lot of stock in that because that goes up and down so much. But I peeked at it, and it's not drastic. I mean, we're probably talking about an 8-pound gain as it stands right now. And I'm okay with that because I know that next week, probably the week that people are listening to this, I will have been in the gym for a couple of days, and that 8 pounds will probably turn into 3 pounds or 5 pounds. Could be anything. So ultimately, I'm good with it. But at the end of the day, I put all this out there because I want to help people. I even had people that send me private messages that just found out that I'm doing shirts now. They just found this out, and they said, why aren't you promoting these shirts? I said, well, gee, have you been on Instagram and see how many people are selling pills, wraps, shakes, online coaching and consulting?
Yeah.
You're bombarded with it. There's so much noise. It's one of the reasons why I don't get on Facebook a lot, because there's a lot of noise. And there's noise on Instagram too, but I feel like there's a little bit less noise, even though more people are on that platform. I think it's such a powerful platform. I definitely want to talk to you about Instagram off the mic at some point. We should talk about it. I feel like I would love to see you on there. I think you would excel at it. You have a great personality. But people ask me, why don't you sell this stuff, or why don't you promote it? Because there's so much selling going on. I don't want to expose that to people. Now, people ask me, they see me, I post pictures in it. I will tell them where to get it, but I don't overtly sell it. I'm probably leaving and burning a lot of money sitting on this table in front of us. There's probably thousands of dollars, if not more, that are probably sitting on this table, burning in a pit of fire because I'm not hitting everybody over the head daily with T-shirts and coaching and all this other stuff. So, back to your point about how you've seen me online doing all this. That's why I do it. I see Gary Vaynerchuk talking about it. He inspired the hell out of me, and I've made it very clear. I want people to know. I want to give the man the credit, even though he says, he doesn't want all that. He just wants people to stop consuming his content. He said, I want to have less than 1 million subscribers on YouTube because I want people to stop watching and start doing.
Yeah.
So powerful. If you're not watching this guy, I feel like you'll be compelled with this guy.
I'll check it out.
But I give him the credit. He inspired me to start documenting this journey. So that's how we're here as far as my end of it is. That's why I put it all out there, is because I was inspired to document over, create, as he says. And over this year, I have met so many people, so many strangers that I have met in this last year that have touched me. They've touched my heart in big ways. And it's really just such a supportive community, and I appreciate there's so much value in that. So that's my end of it. And then I said, I should start doing a podcast. Why not? Why not do a podcast? It's one of my passions. I used to do it, but I used to do it talking about wrestling and all this and that. And there's passion in that, but there's not as much passion as there is in life. Like, you can't get any more real than this. You can't. I mean, you just can't. When you say this is a podcast about my life, and I'm talking about people that are in my life or people that interest me in my life, like, you can't. You can't get unpassionate about that. This is your life. This is daily life. With wrestling, it's like, they're doing a bad storyline. I'm checked out for 2 months.
Yeah.
I'm checked out of them right now. But I'm fully invested in life. I'm fully invested in health. I love all this stuff. So that's my part of it. That's how we're here in the sense. But I do appreciate so much what you said about how you've seen this and how you started checking out the podcast. I guess you probably just saw a post about the podcast. So
that's right. That's right.
Got you in?
Yep.
And how many, just for the record, how many podcasts would you say you listen to like on a weekly basis?
Probably 6 or 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 or 7. Much like you, I have a lengthy commute. It's not as lengthy as yours.
Okay.
But I'm in the car on average an hour and a half every day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so that for the casts that are 45 minutes,
yes,
I can get it in one way.
Perfect.
And a cast that's an hour and a half, I'll do part 1 on the way to work and then part 2 on the way home.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And then there's so much to be said about a podcast too, because it requires your attention. It's like, vlogs I think are powerful as well, but that requires a lot of attention, viewing and listening. Or you can kind of just passively be listening but not really watching. With podcasts, you have people's attention.
Podcasting is fascinating in that if you do have a personal story, or if you do have a theme or a sub-theme on a game or a topic or a field or a discipline, so number one, there's the DIY factor.
Yes.
You can do it yourself, some better than others.
Yes.
But then dial it back. let's dial it back like 35 years ago or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Say you and I wanted to have a radio show. You would have to work your way through the bowels of some TV, radio, some sort of
Yes.
telecom company. You're huffing coffee for various DJs and
Howard
productions.
Stern's got a whole movie about it.
Yeah. And so then you finally get on the air for an hour on Sundays.
Yeah.
But you're doing the programming that you're being told to do.
Yeah.
And you're trying to reach as wide of an audience as possible because your audience is whatever band, whatever broadcast area the FCC says that you can pump out to type thing.
Absolutely.
But now with the internet, you can reach the entire world.
Oh, it's changed the game.
And if you have a specific topic, you're not just limited to your radio dial. You can search whatever you want to seek out guidance, support, wisdom, inspiration, knowledge.
Yeah,
it's
and
a
there's
different
people
world.
in what's called regular FM terrestrial radio that when you hear them talking about podcasting in a negative connotation, they just know that their meal ticket is running out soon and they better reinvent themselves because their cushy $150,000 a year gig is almost over.
They can see the comet coming,
Yes.
and them and all the dinosaurs are having a oh crap moment.
Oh, I got it 8 years ago when I was feuding with a local DJ here in town. I got it years ago. Oh, this podcasting thing, it's never going to work. Look at podcasting now. It's even bigger. I wish that I stuck with it, throughout these years. I probably could have been a lot farther along, but that's neither here nor there. You and I, though, I want to go like way back.
Let's go back.
The early memories I have of you, and I'm not saying our first meeting was here, but my first memories of you are Indian Acres. My grandmother, she had a lot, what they call a lot. It's for people that don't know, Indian Acres is a campground in Southern Virginia, Thornburg to be more specific. How many acres would you say? That's kind of your game, right?
It is my game.
How big of that would you say it is?
I'd say a tenth of an acre would be about 4,000 square feet.
Okay.
And it might be half of that.
Would you say Indian Acres is as big or bigger than like King's Dominion, for instance? Or close?
I don't know how big King's Dominion is.
Yeah.
Somewhere rattling around in my head.
Or like your average theme park. Let's just say.
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
Except for
Assuming your Indian Acres is in total around 800 acres.
Wow.
And so that's a pretty large, if you were
Huge.
going to build 800 acres, that's probably the equivalent of 500-600 houses in a lot of
Lord.
different counties, in a
Okay.
lot of different communities. Yeah.
So-
So it's 800 acres is it's a big area, and you can
Yes.
attest to that.
800 acres. It's in the woods, and people will buy these lots. Sometimes they buy two of them. I mean, we've seen some extravagant lots in there, and usually they'll take like a trailer or an RV and they'll back it into this lot, and they'll go camping for a weekend or a week. I think you really can't be there longer than 2 weeks on average, one continuous trip. But this place, I have so many fond memories of. When my mother told me after my grandmother passed that they were selling it, I was heartbroken.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because at the time, I was not. If I was in the position I was in now, then I would easily have taken it in 1,000%. I certainly, in the situation I'm in now, definitely cannot afford it now. But back then, if I had the job I have now and the kind of stability I have now, or before I got in the trouble I'm in now, I would have certainly gotten it. So when she told me that they were selling it, I was heartbroken because my early memories of you and Chris and everybody was on Indian Acres. Grandma had a lot. Your grandmother, my Aunt Virginia, had a lot right next door, and your parents had a lot, a couple of what they call glens away.
That's right.
Which I guess would be, 2 miles away?
Maybe 3/4 of a mile.
3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, it always seems like it's a far bigger.
Oh, it's a giant distance.
And you guys had a lot right on the lake, which I always thought was awesome. When I found out that we were going to take a trip over there, I was very excited.
Fist pumping.
Fist pumping, yes. If I was a kid and I knew what fist pumping was, then I would have been fist pumping.
Indian Acres is so I don't profess to be a expert historian on this,
Okay.
but I know that in America in the 50s and 60s we were going through this this sort of camping and car camping craze.
Oh,
We had the interstate highway system newly connecting places. We didn't have nearly as many people and nearly as many cars then. And so you literally could just get in your car and zip out to the countryside.
People love to travel.
And so you have these iconic ads of Airstream trailers and things zipping down. You know, Airstream, I have to think, with that metal body of them, we're capitalizing on the space age and all all of
the future
and that modernism and things. And so someone somewhere said, you know what, this car camping thing, let's capture that, but let's put a place to it. Right. And you know, bring your trailer, leave your trailer if you want. Rather than just hooking up and going, have your hookup there. We're going to give you water. We're going to give you electricity. We can't do sewer, but you've got a community bathroom with a shower up, sort of like a KOA campground, something like that.
Very similar.
But then, since you're coming to us, we're going to have a few amenities. You know, that we're going to have tennis and mini golf and swimming pool and the arcade and the teen center and things and a lot of that is still around in many ways. A lot of that is still there, and so you have this structure of essentially a gated community. We don't do a lot of that anymore.
No,
a gated community solely for recreational purposes. It's a fascinating model that no investor would ever do today now, but it's still around,
and it's very much old school in the sense of, you know, you got to fill out an application, you got to be approved, you got to have references. I think one of the last applications I saw a few years ago, you have to have references from existing members even.
Wow.
So it's probably not the easiest to get in there, but I just remember as a kid, this place holds such a place in my heart. I mean, when I tell you I was devastated, it was like, to me, not quite the equivalent, but very damn close to the equivalent of losing a family member. Like, I don't know that I could go on that property and go to grandma's spot and be okay with knowing somebody else is in there. That is very tough. When's the last time you were on the property? Just Indian Acres, I mean.
Give me a moment. I would say,
because your parents still own theirs.
They
correct?
do. So I think we were down there this fall sometime. I think we were down there in October.
Recently.
Yeah, very recently. Wow. Yeah, I've been down a couple times this year. Sort of at the beginning of the season and towards the end of the season.
How's it looking down there, by the way? Is it?
It's
very similar.
It's pretty similar. Yeah, okay. They updated the, you used to have those color-coded guest passes when you would come in. Maybe a year or two ago, they finally updated to like a key card swipe thing.
Okay.
And so you have your plastic credit card type things. That
they used to have like plastic books. I remember.
Yeah.
It's like a checkbook almost.
Exactly.
Just full of these things. Yeah.
Those guest passes only went the way of the dodo maybe 1 or 2 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I have heard inklings, and this is unverified. I've heard inklings that back in the 90s, maybe 25 years ago or so, there were something like 3,400 active dues paying property owners. That number is probably down to around 2,100.
Okay,
again,
so
this
down
is just
a little bit,
it's down a little bit.
So we hear,
yeah. But the lights are on. I think with that diminished level of membership, you have, again, across that 800 acres, where are folks collecting? Where is the activity still? And I think it is around the waterfront for obvious reasons.
Sure, yeah.
As you mentioned, my parents bought a small property there when I was in middle school.
Wow, okay.
And so this is going on probably about 25 years ago now. And I think mom and dad were pretty. I think they were pretty smart to kind of look in the future and say, hey, you know what? This is a great opportunity, just not from a speculative sense or anything like that, but just from a personal enjoyment sense. Hey, let's
family, community, that
exactly,
kind of thing.
Exactly, and. For me, probably a lot like you growing up, those memories are just as vivid as you're describing.
Oh, yes.
my grandparents would get the car packed up on a Thursday, and let's this is summer, so school is out.
100%, yeah.
School is out. They stop by my house on the way. It's my turn that weekend, and so I get to spend the weekend with my grandparents at
fantastic.
Indian Acres, and then the next weekend they would go again. And then it would be my brother's turn, my younger brother, Chris, who's 3 years younger than me. And then when my sister, Kathleen, who's 7 years younger than me, when she was kind of old enough, then she's in the rotation.
Yeah.
And depending on what weekend you're down there, you're seeing Gary, you're seeing Jimmy, you're seeing Aunt Mary and Uncle Caton and Uncle Eddie, and there was a bit of a they were very tactical, buying all of their properties next to you. Have
they
a
were
little
very close,
a
Aunt
little
Georgie
conclave
up on the hill.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Did I don't know if you ever got this. Did you ever get the excitement like when you come down that road, and there would be like this little gap in between like woods, like some random brick building, then woods, and then you knew you were getting ready to pull up on that entrance. You'd see that big sign, right? Did you ever get that?
That I would get it there, and then What about so you get in, you checked in, you're on the blacktop road, you make the right turn, and then it goes from blacktop to gravel. Oh, and then the gravel comes, you're in the trees, and you're like, man, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here.
And this place was amazing too. I mean, just the imagery. I can still smell it. It's got a unique smell, unlike any other woods that I've gone in. It's very much got a smell. The shop in the front, they used to have the icy machine. I would always go and get the ices. And if anything, I feel like because you were a couple of years older, I probably interacted far more with Chris when you guys were down there. But I feel like my first memories of knowing you, and I'm sure we probably were at some family function we probably don't remember where we were there, but my first memory of you, your family, is on that property at Indian Acres. And so that, when I think of Nick Rogers, I think Indian Acres. That's my immediate first thing.
I'm totally fine with that.
Mind. Yeah,
I'm totally fine with being associated with Indian Acres. Yeah. I would agree. I would say the same thing. Yeah. Hanging out with, what family is down this weekend?
Yep.
Oh, my cousin Gary's down, or, cousin Jimmy is down. Like I said, Jimmy DeSalvo, or, oh my gosh, we're going to get a treat. Our cousin Michael is going to be down, one of my first cousins who's 8 years older than me.
Yep.
And so you'd have some regulars. I would consider you one of those regulars. And then some folks you would see every now and then, and it was a special treat. But yeah, that's our family.
Yeah. That's
our version of like the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Cape Cod. The Kennedys had Cape Cod. We had Indian Acres.
And I remember there were times where I'd go with my grandparents for like a week, and we'd get there and they'd have like the little packet of like the calendar of events, the bulletin.
It's still around, and it's online. There's a PDF of it.
Now
every
they
month.
do a PDF. Yeah, I love that. And they would be her and Aunt Georgie would be sitting on the what is that, outside the patio. They'd be playing cards, drinking beer all night.
Yes.
Just having a good time.
Yep.
So I remember all these things. These were good memories. And you mentioned in the 90s, that feels like that's the right time that I remember as well, because the 80s are very blank for me in a lot of ways, but the 90s really where my brain starts to pick up a lot. But I do remember probably towards the late 90s, I was going there a little bit less, and this is as probably the health was starting to decline, going less. And then I probably was, obviously I'm not there, so I wasn't seeing you. I think in between Indian Acres in the 90s, I think the next time I ran into you was around like 05, 06 at Pentagon City Mall. You remember this?
I do remember it.
We just randomly stumbled upon each other.
I do remember it. I was hoping you would remember it.
Oh, I do.
I remember it.
I do.
Yeah.
It stuck out, and we ran into each other. It was like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And embrace, and that was cool. And we might have exchanged numbers. I don't remember. But again, the whole thing about being terrible at keeping in touch, that was me. But this is before social media comes into play.
Yes.
So kind of like, let's fill in the blanks here. Like, obviously now you're working with the city. what is your roadmap? Like, how do you get interested in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff? What are some of kind of your life look like between, I guess, as you say, like middle school up until your kind of adult life, or we start picking back up a little bit?
Around that time in the mid to late 90s, that was when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And high school, I'm inevitably busy. I'm doing
Sure.
a little bit of rec soccer.
You a good student at this point, like A's, B's, that kind
Yeah,
of student?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm
Seem
working
like a real smart guy.
and I'll tell you a personal story.
Okay.
And I tell my wife this all the time because my wife is wonderful.
Yes.
And she has said similar things to me, how, oh, you're so smart and you're so talented.
Right.
I got picked on a lot when I was a little kid. And
Really?
I got bullied a lot.
Same here.
Yeah. And part of it was being a brainy kid who
smart,
knew a lot
yeah.
of stuff. Part of it was that I was just who I was.
Right.
And we go through, we all, as we're growing up we go through faster and slower periods of this where our identity changes and morphs. And I think once we get to our late 20s, we sort of are who we are, but then
Sure.
we become better versions of ourselves as we get older.
100%,
And,
yeah.
But I was always, this is who I am, take it or
Yeah.
leave it. And if I'm going to get made fun of that, then
Right.
I'll take those lumps because I'm not going to sell out.
Yeah.
And so that period was, and so when you said, oh, you're a pretty smart guy,
Yeah.
I was, but there were times where I would have sold all that knowledge down the world, sold it all just to have a few more friends,
Sure.
be a bit more accepted,
I think we all hope for that,
Yeah,
right? I would love to be in better shape like you are at that time, right? And not be the
Yeah.
big guy. Hey,
Yeah.
fat ass, that kind of thing. Because
Yeah.
that was kind of what I got picked on. You got picked on for being smart. I got picked on for being fat.
And we're terrible to each other. Like, people are so terrible.
Yeah.
The irony is that it's
probably worse now.
We're I'll say teenagers, and at least in this era,
Yeah.
I will be learning in the years whether that's changed or not. But isn't it ironic how at such a difficult period of everyone's lives, people can be so terrible to one another?
Yeah.
And I really hope I hope my case is just a small sample size in that regard.
Sure.
But I excelled in school. I did well in high school. I got accepted to what was then Mary Washington College.
Okay. So
I
you stayed kind of local.
I stayed very local, actually. I wanted a smaller college experience.
Okay.
You can do very small. You can go to a school with 500 kids.
But with your credentials, you probably could have gone on to something far larger if you wanted to.
I could
your
have
credentials.
Yeah. I could. I could have gone to a big school, a small school.
Yeah.
I had options. I really felt that had I gone to a larger place, I would have drowned
Okay.
in a sea of just overwhelming people.
Sure.
And I think that was correct at the time. I came out of high school with, like a lot of folks, with very little emotional maturity, and
Sure.
I got that through. I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have a lot of those older mentors to say, hey, you're being a jackass. Let me show you how to not be a jack. I just had to figure that out the hard knocks way, make a lot of mistakes on the way.
Sure.
I finish up at Mary Washington. I have my degree in geography. I was always interested in maps in the world and what's going on right now. And that field, it's a social science like many others.
Okay.
But it has to do with place and why place matters.
Yes.
And that was so fascinating to me.
Wow. Okay.
One of the faults of that period was that I wasn't as focused on transitioning that into a career.
Okay.
And what that means is that I didn't necessarily have a job lined up afterwards.
Right.
I don't think kids coming out of college these days have that luxury.
Yeah.
With the new economy, you really have to have a game plan of some sort. And there are folks who do that 4-year degree now, and they pay that money to get that degree, and it may not be in a very employable field, and you're just like, what am I doing now? So
yeah.
I go back to summer of 2002.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate to land a job with my alma mater working in college admissions. And so later on down the line, I have this funny thing. I say, I can't throw a football 80 yards. I'm not a rocket scientist. The only thing I'm good at is talking.
Okay.
And this was a job where if you were good at talking, you could do well.
I get that. I mean, this is your first podcast, and dude, you're crushing it right now. I'm telling you.
And so I did recruitment travel. I traveled all over the East Coast.
Yeah.
I worked college fairs. I visited high schools where sometimes I'm just talking with a mom who's interested in their son and daughter. Sometimes it's a group of 5 counselors. Sometimes it's a group of 50 kids.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 3 years. And between some things in my personal life on the relationship side that were very impactful,
right, and
me just kind of outgrowing Fredericksburg, outgrowing that office, and wanted to do something else, I was searching for something else.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to 2 important books that would end up changing my life.
Okay.
The first is called Suburban Nation. It's a book that was written by a husband and wife team called Andres Duany and Elizabeth Platter Zyberk, and they were co-authored with a colleague of theirs named Jeff Speck, and they worked for a urban design, town planning, architecture firm called DPZ, based in, I think at the time, offices in Florida and North Carolina. And they talked about a title like Suburban Nation. They're talking about the built environment. They're talking about communities, suburban sprawl, traffic, things that you're very familiar with.
Yes.
And I grew up having these questions about my surroundings. And I would ask questions like, why don't we have a mayor in our neighborhood? Why don't we have a main street that we walk down to?
Right.
I have a very vivid memory of being at my sister's high school graduation, just casually chatting with probably an uncle of someone who a local relative who was there to see their niece or nephew graduate, and he was asking me what I did, and I asked him what he did, and he said, "Yeah, I slug or I commute up from the Fredericksburg area, and it's about an hour and a half one way." And I just, like, my brain just melted.
Yeah.
And that was so wrong to me. And I felt very passionately about wanting to do something about it. And these people had an antidote, and I wanted more.
Right.
The second book was written by a guy named James Howard Kunstler. It was called Home from Nowhere.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to me, he had written a text called The Geography of Nowhere, a nonfiction book before then. It was sort of a casual writer's, I shouldn't say casual, he's a brilliant writer, but it was a layperson's diagnosis of what was going on wrong with how we had built our communities.
Right.
A lot of the similar themes, but it was much rougher in the geography of Nowhere. And Kunstler's a fascinating case because he was sort of, in many ways, the gig economy before there was a gig economy. He drove a taxi cab for a while. He wrote nonfiction for a while. He worked as a newspaper journalist for a while in the 1970s, covering cults and things in upstate New York, and so he has this, and he has a theater degree, and so he comes at it from this layperson's perspective of incredibly specific dialogue.
Okay.
And then the second book, he hung out with Andres Duany, he hung out with Elizabeth Platter, he hung out with the experts, and he learned how to speak the language. And it was, when I'm reading these books, the way I describe it is I had these observations about the world, and I knew something was wrong. These people gave me a language to articulate what that was.
Okay.
It was very powerful, and so I decided to I quit my job. I enrolled at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. I got a master's degree in urban and regional planning.
Look at you.
Yeah, and the pictures from there are hilarious because I've got this long hair down in my shoulders.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
wow, look at Nick.
It was a unique phase. Still very, very studious, but
Right.
and it was a good environment for me because I felt like academically I was among similar people, similar peers.
Yes.
It was very work hard, play hard. Very, very work hard, play hard.
Hard work always wins.
This is a
Wink, wink, nod, nod.
very true statement. Very true statement. And so at this point, I'm living in Richmond. I'm not really going to Indian Acres.
Yeah.
And, I'm doing my own thing.
You're
I'm
hyper
studying.
focused.
I'm hyper focused.
Yeah.
I'm hyper focused. At this point, we all have our degrees from VCU, but none of us have any money.
Yeah.
And so I say, hey, let's go up to the campsite. Let's go drink beer for a weekend. And so probably around 2007 was when I started going back to the property.
Sure.
I was very fortunate to land a job with the city of Charlottesville.
Okay.
I had incredible mentors there. The director was a seasoned professional named Jim Tolbert.
Okay.
And my immediate supervisor was a woman named Missy Creasy, a very new manager at the time, had only been in her management position probably about 10 months after working for the city for a number of years, but was very sage and really understood kind of what I needed to grow and develop, the best boss I've ever
Sure.
had. I stayed there for 3.5 years. And I was 31 at the time. I wanted to be a smaller fish in a bigger pond.
Right.
And I leaned on some of that personal experience with my roots in this area to land a job with Fairfax County.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we're bringing it really local.
Yeah.
Now.
And so I landed a job with their Department of Planning and Zoning.
Okay.
And I worked there for 5 years in what folks in the vernacular would call current planning, but I was reviewing development proposals for anything from gas stations all the way up to thousands to hundreds of thousands of square feet of mixed-use development near metro stations and things.
So, like, if I were to ask you just a random question, because it's something that boggles my mind, and I don't know if this is your world. If it is, great. If it isn't, it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why the hell don't we have like a Wawa around here? Like, is that kind of close to what we're talking? Like, developing?
It can be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So someone like a Wawa.
That's kind of that's like a legit question. Why the hell don't we have a Wawa around?
So there's a corporate Wawa, and there I don't want to say bean counters, but there's multiple different arms of Wawa, and they're looking at a lot of different things. They're looking at the market.
Right.
They're saying,
I feel like they would crush it around here, for the record.
yeah, and so and it's fascinating how these decisions, they're partly made due to market questions. Can I make money or can I not make money?
Yeah.
So there's a part of that. But then you have shareholders and you have boards of directors, and you find out that these financial decisions are not only made on that can I make money or not.
They probably don't
question.
like the price around here. Am I far off on that?
Well, that's one factor.
Yeah.
It's a multivariate factor.
Okay.
Can I make money?
Yes.
So if the answer is no, then I'm going to go elsewhere.
Sure.
Can I make money in the way I want to make money? And what I mean by that is, can I find enough land? Can I?
This area's land is hard to come by, right?
Can I find enough land? Is it 1 acre? Is it 2 acre? Do I need 5 acres? I've got a good site, but it's only a quarter of an acre. Well, I can't fit the number of gas pumps that I need on there. Can I get through the local political process? Yes. Can I just go and get a site plan approved, or do I need to go all the way to the local governing body to get their approval? On their way, do I have to fight through a lot of community opposition for what's going to happen to traffic and parking, environmental factors? And so that's that multivariable analysis that they're doing. Oftentimes they'll hire people like me who work in the private side to assist them, land use attorneys and such. And so I dealt with a lot of great people on the other side who were trying to get these developments approved. And sometimes they had a good product and sometimes they had a very bad product. And when they had a bad product, we told them it was bad and we told them why.
Well, for the record, I just on the sidebar of Wawa, and I'm not paid or endorsed in any way by them. It's just the old fat kid in me that loves Wawa. Still kind of does on the weekends.
Don't worry, I'm a fan too.
But like when I look at like they recently moved into Fairfax County, like out in Chantilly, that area.
Yep.
And for the record, they're crushing it out there.
Yeah.
I saw Sheetz and Wawa move like a half a mile, maybe less, apart from each other, right down the street from where I work. And each one of them, it's not even like they're hurting for business. They're both crushing it.
They're right there.
They're both packed. I mean, when you think of like 7-Eleven, it's like the same old stuff. There's a guy in there, and it's like this pizza that's been sitting here spinning around for hours, right? They look really old and crusty.
Yep.
But then you walk into like a Wawa Sheetz, like this little touch screen, and it'll make it fresh. Or maybe we could argue if it's fresh or not, but like you hit the button and you can get hyper specific on what you want. I want French fries on my steak and cheese. Yeah. And all the weight loss people are listening to me right now. They're like, "Geez, Gary, stop it.
Yeah,
it's not cheat day." But seriously, I look at somebody, or even like Sonic, right? I mean, you look at them. They've moved recently in Southern Virginia. They're killing it down there.
Yep.
So I'm like, holy crap! Like, you know, when you look around here, the norm is like 7-Eleven in that Wawa Sheetz kind of gas station world, or McDonald's, Taco Bell, Wendy's. That's kind of the normal. Burger King versus like a Sonic or something like that. And I think when I think of these other businesses, I'm like, if they moved in here, they would just kill it. But like you said, there's a lot of other stuff they need to go through.
Yep.
To be able to even think about getting in here.
Yep.
So that blows my mind. So you went through and you've studied all this stuff. It fascinates you. You talk about the books you read that inspired you, and you worked for Fairfax County. You worked for Charlottesville. Where are you now? What are you doing right now?
So right now I work for a small startup company that's been around for about 7 years. They're called the Berkeley Group.
Okay.
And they are local government experts, local government consultants, for lack of a better word. And so the two founders, one of them comes from a planning background like I do, and the other comes from a transportation planning, public works background. And so they said to themselves, we loved, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but we love working for local government, but we don't really enjoy working in local government anymore.
Okay.
And so they said, can we do what we love, but in a different way? And so through some examination of the state laws and kind of having their own conversation to see, is there a market potential for this? They started their own company saying, we're going to do the same type of projects and thing. If you need an a la carte project, a new set of rules and regulations, or if you need us to manage your new road widening or something like that, we can do that. But if you just have a vacancy on your staff and you need person in seat 1 day, 2 days, 5 days a week, let us do that for you. Let us upgrade what you do. Let us help you do what you're doing better. Let us give you an extra set of hands.
Sure.
And so that model is really I mean, we hear about it all the time at the federal level, right? Oh, it's actually, contractors who are doing the work, not paid staffers. And it's a model that is more familiar in other states, but fairly untested here in Virginia. And they have had some, again, like I said, a small company. There's about 10 of us who are full time.
Yeah.
But the model has incrementally grown over the past few years. And so whereas early on the clients were small towns and more rural jurisdictions, I drive to Prince William County 4 days a week, and I've been there since April. And I'm helping out some new colleagues and an older colleague from my Fairfax days get a lot of work done that they hadn't been able to do.
Sure.
So a lot of my days now are spent working on land use regulations, zoning laws, working with those developer types who are approving site plans and sign permits, and just trying to help them find ways to do what they do, have always done, but just do it a little better.
So at the end of the day, I mean, you're actually having an effect. You're able to make a difference, essentially, in the community.
It's a fascinating difference where when you're just staff,
Yes.
When you're just staff, you have that training, you have that knowledge, you're having those observations,
Yes.
and you're speaking the truth, and you're saying, this is a real problem, and the reaction is, yeah, but you're just staff.
Yeah.
Let us who have the pay grade 8 levels above you,
who can't relate to that's listening right now.
It's so
that's
ubiquitous in every field. It's fascinating how I'm saying a lot of the same things now, but because of my role as I've been welcomed there,
yes.
and there is a problem that I'm being asked to solve.
Yes.
Those same solutions that I've been talking about my entire career, people say, hey, you know what? Let's do it that way. Or we need you to do something. Can you do this? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Your
for you.
voice, for once, for so long, it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, if only you did it this way, you tried it this way, you could do this. But now somebody's like, say, okay, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
And that was an incremental approach when you think about it. Not weight loss, but just taking an idea or an industry that I wanted to work in and say, okay, where can I get exposure? I did the small town thing in Charlottesville. I did the big urbanizing county thing. And so I got experience at both levels of the spectrum. And I joined this firm. And only after 10 years of experience can I say, okay, I can see how it built onto something. I can see how that trajectory has gotten me there. But at year 7, no, I was in the weeds. At year 2, no, I'm just making mistakes and trying to figure out what I'm doing. And so, that patience and consistency.
Yes, the 4 pillars.
Yeah. I identify with that a lot.
Yeah, no, And Gary Vaynerchuk talks all about it. He's like, you got to eat shit for so long. He said, that's how he talks. Mm-hmm. He'll blow you away the way he talks. But it's about, eating shit for so long. And then you finally get to eat. It's like eat shit for 2 or 3 years, eat caviar for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Right? That's true. That's the working world.
And I feel like based on our conversation today, based on what I've seen with you online, socially, or just talking with you, I feel like you are at the high point of your life right now. You've got this job that you're in right now. You're making a legitimate difference. You just got married.
I did.
Are we talking like a month now? Has it been about a month?
It's been about 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Very recently.
Very recently. Now I've gone down that road twice now. But to talk to somebody else about it now, I mean, this is your first marriage.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And what was that like for you to I always talk about walking that aisle. It's a huge thing. The rush of emotion, because you go through so long planning it, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the hype and the excitement, and then you finally get there and you look at this person that you love, and you look in their eyes, and you're there, and everybody's there, and everybody can see it, and you walk that aisle. I like how you guys had it, this nice big room, similar to how my wife and I did it, and you walk in and you look at this person that you love, and you look them in the eye, and you know that it's time, right? Yeah. Tell me about that feeling for you, that day for you, the kind of the emotions you were having.
It was an affirmation of a long journey.
Yes.
In many ways. Michelle and I found each other at the right time for each of us. Had we found each other 5 years or 10 years prior, we probably would have just walked by each other, not even noticing one another. You can attest to the 11 months of planning that went into our wedding.
Yes.
It's a long, stressful slog, and it was totally worth it. I'm seeing this lovely, amazing woman walking down, and so it's humbling because it's like, you want to marry me? Nick Rogers, the shrimpy, nerdy kid from Stafford, Virginia,
and she's got a smile that can light up an entire room. For the record,
I love her smile. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about her.
Electrifying smile for sure. A lot of people said that.
Mm-hmm. Very humbling that it's like, you want to marry me.
Right.
Doubly humbling that she trusts me and welcomes me into her life to parent her daughter, now my stepdaughter, and really she's just my daughter now, Hannah. And so it's an affirmation that you've come to a point where you're ready to be a dad, where you're ready to be a father, and you look around the room, and the room was amazing, just as you described, because you've got you've got your family and your friends, and
they're literally surrounding you. Not to cut you off, they're literally surrounding you.
And then
I love that.
And then in the balcony, up above, it was like I was at a rock concert or something.
Yes, very much so.
Little kids everywhere and things, and we talked earlier about how the only thing I'm good at is talking.
Yes.
It's a feeling that's very hard to describe. I find myself, I guess how I would round off that point is that I feel very fortunate.
Yes.
Because I think there's a lot of folks, you spoke just a moment ago how you've gone through a divorce.
Yes.
I have other friends and family who have gone through similar, very, very challenging times.
Very relatable.
Some of them divorced, some of them still married.
Yeah.
And people older than me who don't find that person. And if you don't want to get married, if you're fine doing your thing, that's fine. I get there's a lot of that in the world too. Oh, you should start dating. You should do what you want to do.
Yes.
But for those folks who are looking for a partner in life, I think there are sometimes folks out there who settle.
Yeah.
I think there are sometimes folks who just make bad decisions.
Yeah.
And at 38, it happened at probably a non-standard time for me. Probably most people get married younger, not as much these days, but most people get married younger than 38.
Right.
But I'm very much a glass half full person. Better we found each other now than when I was 48, 58. 68 or never.
But you guys, I mean, you talk about how you guys found each other at the right time. It's not like, I don't know that you guys weren't necessarily looking, right? I mean, it's kind of just happens, right?
You're exactly right.
And how long, I mean, tell me about the first time you met. Tell me about how those paths cross. So if you don't mind sharing that.
I don't. No, that's fine.
Some of those sometimes it's a personal thing, sometimes not. But if you want to share, go ahead.
Yeah. So Michelle and I were coworkers.
Okay.
At Fairfax.
Fairfax, okay.
And so we were colleagues. And she worked in one division. I worked in another division of the Department of Planning and Zoning.
But in other words, she can kind of understand the world that you're in. You understand the world she's in.
Exactly.
Makes it super relatable.
Exactly.
I love it. Go ahead.
Yep. And I recall her first day on the job. Right. And she would not have seen this, but I get to work on a Monday. There had been a front of the counter staff who had recently retired. I'm walking by and I say, "Oh yeah, the new person who is taking Marshall Weatherly's place is starting today."
Yep.
And I literally did the head snap, the head snap,
Stopped
and I said,
in your tracks,
"Oh my gosh, like who is that?"
Yeah.
I was
probably have that electrifying smile we were talking about, right? Hey, nice to meet you, that kind of deal, right?
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. Now, whereas I'm more extroverted, I've been classified as very extroverted over periods of my life. I think I'm only just like slightly extroverted.
Right.
My wife is very introverted.
Oh, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm more on that road, and I'm learning to get out of that now.
Yeah, and really, you can own it, and she owns it. It's just how we're hardwired. It's it's how we recharge. We could do a whole nother podcast on extroversion and introversion.
God, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But with her, whereas like other staff members would have given her a lot of anxiety and it would have been an uncomfortable setting, she always talked about talking with me. It was very comfortable discourse, and I felt the same way.
Right.
I just wanted to chat with her lots and lots and lots, but then I had to go do work. I had to go meet with developers and what have you. And so we got to a point where we started dating.
Okay.
And I was very sensitive about when coworkers found out, them finding out the right way.
Sure.
There are all sorts of scenarios where someone who's younger, who's a single mom, me having been in a relationship, appreciable time before then, I was not going to accept any chitter chatter and rumors and nonsense.
Sure. And for the record, was this your first time dating somebody at a job, or had you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is all new.
Yeah, and so
you don't know how to deal with it, right?
I don't know how to deal with it, but I know it's right, and I know in my heart that I wanted to be with her and wanted to be next to her. It was a love that was growing, and so all of those risks, I said, okay, are you going to do this? Is it worth it? Yes. And so, and then if it's worth it, then it's like, okay, well, then how do you make this work? And so,
how do you figure that out?
Yeah. And so we dated as colleagues for, I guess, almost a year before I left and I joined the Berkeley group.
Right.
That was in April of 2016 when I left.
Okay.
And then we got engaged 7 months later in November of 2016. Wow. So yeah, she's wonderful. We could do another whole podcast on that too.
So I mean, look at you, man. You got the job you want. You got the woman you want. I mean, everything is really fallen into place for you, and it's amazing how that happens in life, right? A lot of times these things come when we least expect them. Like meeting my wife. I met her when I was previously married, and we didn't do anything. We just knew of each other. She'd see me at a concert or whatever. But it's amazing how these things in life come along that take you to the next step when you don't know that that's about to happen. It just blows you away.
I see you and your weight loss journey, and you had those, and I don't know the full story about all of those times where you tried and failed previously.
Sure.
But for whatever reason, at your age now, you were ready to do it right.
And I never saw that coming, for the record. Come and see me August of last year and tell me that I'm going to be in this position. I would have said, what kind of drugs are you on?
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be almost 100 pounds, if not 100 pounds lighter. You're like August 2016, Gary Cantrell, you're going to be sub 300 in 15 months.
Yeah. So, what?
Yeah.
What planet are you from? Are you from the future? Did you come off of a DeLorean? What's going on? You never see these things in life coming.
I think you being at your point and saying, hey, I can do this, and then achieving that success, there's a part of just maturity, the discipline, it kind of all aligned. You were ready to do it this time in your life. And the same goes for me.
Sure.
Had I gotten married at 24,
who knows
28, 33.
While you're still figuring things out, your career, etc.
Yeah. With not as good of a match on the other side.
Yeah.
Again, career in a different place, just like you said.
Sure.
Could have crashed and burned. And so I consider myself very lucky that many of those important life milestones happened when I had the wherewithal to take it on and
it's like you've aged like a fine wine, essentially, like that saying, right? I mean, you talk about 38, or it's later in life, but man, I mean, it came across at the right time.
Yep.
Because like you said, God knows if it was in your 20s, who, if you look about the person you were in your 20s, would the person in the 20s be ready for that? And I know, like me,
some folks might be.
Yeah,
I know I wasn't.
Some folks are. I'm not here to judge. In my 20s, I clearly was not. I thought I was. I clearly was not. I was still in bands, and I was still very much, curious to see what the world had to offer, to put it in the kindest way possible. But yeah, I mean, and this weight loss thing, this had to come along at the right time, where I'm building to the best version of me. It's a constantly evolving process. It's constantly going. It's never over. It's a constant thing, and who knows where I'll be in 2 more years. Like I legitimately don't know. I know that I'll be lighter, and I feel like I'll be in a better spot. We talk about the college stuff and high school and all this and that. I was a C&D kind of guy, honestly. That's who I was. I got out of high school, and I didn't go to college. I had no I had zero at the age you are in high school, that should not be your mindset, or at least that's what you're told in life. Oh, you shouldn't think like you got to go to college. You got to, whatever. My mind was, I'm going to be a rock star. That's what I thought. And I was dead wrong. And that's okay, because I still feel like even without the college, you can still succeed. And I feel like people of today, maybe necessarily like if they don't have that college education, there's still room to succeed. You just got to find what you're really good at, and
you got to have a plan.
And go after it. Yeah.
You got to have that's what I tell folks. It's if college is part of your plan, then that works. Or if you're going to go get a trade, we have all sorts of shortages around the country on people who we need in trades to just build stuff.
Yeah.
That could be part of your plan. If you want to be a rock star, there is a point A and a point B to get to be a rock star.
Figure it out.
And you follow those four things.
4 pillars,
Yeah. And so, and then now at 38, you being a little younger than me, when you're in high school, it feels, the messaging is very linear. And what I mean by that is you're gonna go, this is the proverbial, for you and I, the baby boomers out there who said, okay, you're going to go to college right after your senior year.
Yes.
And then you're going to get a job.
Yes.
And then like you'll advance in your career, and then maybe you meet someone and have kids. This is sort of linear American dream type story. You and I are living proof, and you and I have met multitudes of people who have had all sorts of zigzags on that linear, on what would be traditionally that linear path, and yet all of them have their own individual successes.
Yes.
And they didn't follow that linear path.
To borrow another line, yet another line from Gary Vee. I want to give the man the credit. I believe he deserves the credit. He says, you got to taste shit. You got to taste it. You got to figure it out. Okay, so like I'll lay it out for you here on this table virtually. Mm-hmm. You graduate from high school. It's like, oh, I want to be in the band. Okay, the band doesn't quite work out. I tasted it. It's not working. Mm-hmm. I still play guitar as a hobby. Maybe one day I'll write some more songs and I'll record them. That's a fun little hobby. Then I get into podcasting in 2007, and I spent the next 10 years tasting podcasting, tasting internet radio. In the middle of that, I launch one show that's about pro wrestling, and then I decide that maybe it's evolved into maybe a little bit of life stuff. So I talk a little bit about wrestling and baseball and movies and music, because I have all these interests. And then I decide that, I'm still tasting shit. Well, let me launch a separate wrestling site in 2014. Let me disrupt that industry, because there's a lot of things wrong in the wrestling world where they have all these websites that have all these ads that spam you and all these podcasts, and they charge you all this money. And I went and I charged like more than half of what they charged. I charged $3. They were charging $10. I cut them in half, and I had superior audio quality. And I said, let me disrupt that world. So I'm tasting stuff. I got a wrestling site. I have a live radio show talking about my life and talking about baseball and movies and music and all these things I'm interested in. And then I get burned out, and then I stop tasting for a while. And then I said, what can I get invested in? What can I get behind?
Yeah.
I can get behind my life. That's something I can get behind, because you're never going to lose interest in that. You taste and you taste and you taste and you taste. You bite into that steak that you just love, and you can't get enough of it. Hopefully you don't eat enough. You don't want to balloon up, but you taste it, you love it, and you go back for what is familiar. So I find this weight loss journey, and I go super heavy into it, but then I start borrowing all these other things that I like: the podcasting, the YouTubing, the storytelling on social media. And I kind of have this tree, which is now my life, and I have the different branches, the weight loss journey, which is kind of the central main focus of the tree. But then I've got the podcasting off on one, YouTube on the other, and Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff. So I've tasted all these things, and then I arrived at that one meal that I really like. And so you figure out life, just like with you. You're going through, and maybe you've gone through other things. We kind of talk more about the planning and the city stuff, but maybe there's other stuff that you tasted that you like. Maybe you had a thing with music, or you liked one of the. Talk about. Did you experience any of that in your zigzag part of your life, where you tasted different things before you arrived at, I want to do planning, and I want to make a difference, and all these cool things you're doing now?
Not necessarily on the professional side. I feel very fortunate in that regard.
Yes.
In that, after doing the college admissions, I found something that I love, and I've done sort of different versions of that. It's a pretty broad field, and so I've been able to play in various corners of that sandbox.
Because you could have stayed in that sandbox forever, right? I mean, you could be a lifer in there. There are college admissions.
Yep. I could have just been a dean of admissions somewhere.
Yeah, you could have gone up that ladder and ended up as a dean of admissions. There you go. Perfect.
Yep. There are some folks, some of my friends and family know I've been a lifelong Magic the Gathering player since high school. There are folks who really dive into that world, and they're producing content and they're grinding onto professional tour circuits and things, and so they're in the competitive gaming world. There's a line where I could have done that maybe, but I wasn't.
Who knows?
Yeah, I wasn't. I feel like that was a lesser version of your dabbling in music, whereas like you were doing music off and on. It's always been more of a I've played competitively, but it's been more of a social experience for me in that regard. Most of my tastes that have come and gone here and there, a lot of that has been on the relationship side of things, and I won't go into the details on that. But
I feel like those, if we did, those could be their own podcast. Mine probably 3 or 4 parts, easily.
And you've been very open, and I commend you for that vulnerability in opening up on some of your journey. But I was vividly remembering your Lloyd Dobler moment.
Yes,
and I haven't literally had a Lloyd Dobler moment. Like I've never gotten the boombox. But I've had similar moments where I've been recklessly vulnerable, thinking that was the right thing to do.
Yes,
and I think what it really comes down to, personally, as men and as middle school kids and high school kids, I can speak for myself in that you get socialized very strangely, and you think that if you're Lloyd Dobler, like that works. That's not how it works. That's a very like binary. Like if I do this, then I get the girl.
Right.
There's a whole nother person on that relationship, and it really wasn't until about 7-8 years ago that I really started to factor in the other side. My role is not in dating and relationships in life. It's not just about what can I get out of this. I became a lot more compassionate, and a lot more empathetic.
Yes,
and I was able to say, how can I better this other person's life?
I love that.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, that, I mean, we just go through so much stuff in life before we figure out where we're meant to be. I mean, like the music thing. I feel like now, I mean, I still play and write as like a hobby, and maybe one day I'll record some stuff, but I feel like my role now can be better suited as like somebody behind the scenes, honestly. Not even as a songwriter, but just as somebody who like helps determine what goes on like the radio. I could tell you 100 instances of different songs that I was like, I heard that on an album, that should be on the radio. They pick it for the radio and it blows up. Or they don't pick it for radio and this album tanks. Like I feel like from an analytical, there's always like so many ideas that go in this head that now, like what I'm doing now with the weight loss journey, but social media, podcasting, YouTubing, I can finally put some of this stuff out there. I can try, taste different things and just kind of see what works. But I feel like for me, I'm on the right path of the weight loss is the central thing. That thing's never going to change. It's just work, and win. Continue to put in that hard work, and then try all this other cool stuff on the side as just extensions of that. I mean, I'm writing a book right now. I've told people this. You've heard this on the podcast. So trying all these different things and putting my life out there probably more so than I've ever done before, because I feel like it'll help people understand me better in some weird way.
It's fascinating how I go back to So I think back to when I first left the admissions job and went to grad school.
Yeah.
And that first year of grad school, it was a great transition because I was actually working for the university as a kind of a counselor / advisor, the person who helps you pick your classes out, helps you select a major when you get into academic probation after your first semester, try to get you on a good path. And particularly for those kids who I was working with in their second semester, we had, for lack of a better word, a curriculum that we met with them on a weekly basis. And one of the big components of that curriculum was motivation.
Yeah.
And we learned about and we discussed with the kids, we taught them about motivation, the external motivation of your parents saying, clean your room and eat your peas. Mm-hmm. And you do it, but you do it begrudgingly because it's coming from the outside. And I talked to my students about the power of internal motivation.
Yes.
And that sounds like some Tony Robbins bullshit when I say it that way.
No, I get it.
But I know, like, having taken the experience that you've had this past year, that is a hallmark and a textbook example of how much more powerful the internal motivation is. What's fascinating to me as I hear you discuss the incredible vulnerability of telling your story online, of being a part of this Instagram community, to an unlearned observer, they would look at that as, oh, that's just like a search for fuel for external motivation to kind of keep this weight loss journey going.
Sure.
My interpretation is that you are giving fuel to others.
Yes. The empathy that you speak about.
And your internal motivation that's not only just driving your weight loss journey, but is impacting others. It's like a blast furnace. It's like the steam engine on the locomotive. And just like there's two unlucky guys just fueling coal into this thing, and it's going. It's going.
I hope so. I want to. You talk about Tony Robbins. I want to get into that world, but maybe less of the bullshit. Like, I wanna travel the world and speak to people. Like that's ultimately. When people say, "What's your end game?" or whatever, I mean, I don't know that I want it to end, but like that would be the end game: is write the book, go on tour, and meet people. Take what I'm doing online to a face-to-face, one-on-one kind of level, and just help as many people as possible. I don't need the bullshit $100,000 a year online coaching, life coaching kind of stuff. I want to just help people. And that's why I put all this stuff out there. I don't put it behind a paywall. I don't have mastermind groups of other fellow weight loss people. Like, I just put it out there. I just give it all because I want to give value to people. That's the reason.
That's awesome.
That's the sole reason. And I've said this many times before. I mean, yes, there is a certain thing of course I want to put eyes on what I'm doing. Of course. Anybody that says they're not is absolutely lying. Sure, I would love people to see what I'm doing, but the reason I want them to see what I'm doing is because I want it to help them and maybe give them a different way of thinking. Do I have anything to sell you? No, but just as sell you on the thought of a different way of living, and not putting all the money into this shakes and pills and all this other stuff. Just
the belts,
just believe the belts, the belts that shake your abs. I literally bought one of these things. It was a waste of $20. I should have just returned it. But look. You've been so good with your time. You've been so generous. I appreciate you, Nick. Like, I'm so glad, number one, that you just randomly sent me a message that you had took in one of my podcasts and suddenly it inspired you to want to listen to more. And it kind of like reignited a relationship between you and I, which I greatly appreciate, because to bring it all back home, I am terrible when it comes to these things at times, and there's probably other family that say, yeah, I never hear from this guy, and I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm terrible with it. But I'm just so glad that you reached out, that you heard something that you liked, and you kept listening, and it brought us closer together. I mean, I appreciate that so much.
It's been it's been an incredible honor to be on the podcast.
I guess after you've heard so many, it's kind of like it's like, hey, now I could be on it. And for the record, I'm looking at the timestamp here. This will be a to and from one. We've done an hour and a half here. Can you believe
that? Wow, I cannot believe that.
Doing your first, but we'll wrap it up with this. Doing your first podcast. What was kind of your expectation of how you thought it would go, and like what now that we've gone an hour and a half, did it feel like an hour and a half? Did it feel like what's your feeling on doing a podcast, and did it meet or exceed expectations in any way?
I would say it went about the way I thought.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is I've had to give very important presentations in front of pretty important people during my career, and you know, a general rule of thumb, if you're gonna speak for 10 minutes,
yes,
it is not unreasonable to put 10 hours worth of prep into that.
And you seem tailor-made for it, by the way. Your personality, like, I feel like you exceeded that.
And so coming into the podcast, being someone who comes from that school of thought of preparing, I thought, let me reach out to Gary. We could talk about this and this and this.
We didn't talk ahead of time about much. I just said, we're just going to call it a wrestling term. We're going to call it in the ring.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yep. And I said to myself, no. We're going to do what usually happens, and a lot of times I'll put in that prep, and that prep is necessary.
Sure, of course.
But if I've got talking points and I've got a certain way, once the camera is on or once I'm in front of that microphone, it's just a natural flow. I'm not following the script. The talking points are kind of in and around there somewhere.
You can read a room, kind of what buttons to push.
Yep.
Love that.
And that's been the experience today. It was just a conversation, and that's what I was looking for. And I hope it's impactful on the listeners.
Oh man, I feel like this one. There are many that I've gotten lots of feedback on. I feel like it's gonna be one of those ones, and I'm interested to hear what like maybe people in your world. Like I hope that you'll share it with a friend or two, and maybe they'll, because I realize that like. People that might hear my podcast for the first time, we've talked about this. It's not hyper focused on one central thing. So it could be jarring to somebody that's not exposed to kind of like who I am on Instagram or whatever, where I'm all over the freaking place. Like
the music, the weight loss,
I feel like I would be curious to know what people outside of the world, like, I mean, even getting the feedback from you, right? I mean, like we knew each other years ago, but like, we've changed as people. We still love each other. We're family, but like we've changed as people. I mean, you probably hear this for the first time, and obviously you like what you heard. But when you heard it, it's probably like, wow, he's going all over the freaking place. Like it's like a freaking jumping bean. So I'm interested to hear what people that like outside of the people that kind of like know me. I always wonder like what they think. Not do they like it, do they hate it, but just like what do they make of all this madness? Because I know that I'm all over the place, but I'll be the first to tell you. I'm all over the place, and I'll probably repeat it 2 or 3 times to let you know, like, this is what you're in for. I'm all over the place, and I think like once you let people know kind of what to expect, and then you just you deliver what you intend to deliver. They're either going to like it or they're not, but at least they knew ahead of time what they kind of got themselves into. Dude,
it's been great.
This has been awesome.
Yeah,
we'll have to do this again sometime.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, is there any? I mean, obviously, we talk a little bit about social media. Usually, people that I have on, they're like from Instagram or whatever. They always want to plug something like "check me out here" or "hey there." I feel like you could be one of these people that if you had a bigger presence online, you probably would excel at it. Like, is there anything that like you would want to plug? Do you have anything to plug? Or
you're welcome to follow me on Twitter.
Okay,
I'm at Nick Roger. That's my first name.
Roger.
Yeah, so it's I've got a good friend who gave me that nickname years ago. He's the only one who really uses it. So it's my first name, Nick, and then the last for the first four letters of my last name, so
Right.
Roge. You know, you couldn't get N. Rogers or something.
Somebody had that already.
They'd eaten that up already. I am on Instagram.
Yes.
I've been using it just as a watcher so
Sure.
far, not really posting any content on that.
Man.
Maybe that'll change, but you can find me on there as S Jerusalem.
Where do you get S Jerusalem from?
There's a very influential comic book that I read in high school and college by a British author named Warren Ellis. It's called Transmetropolitan.
Okay.
And the main character is an erratic yet talented journalist named Spider Jerusalem.
Okay.
And he does political reporting, and he's incredibly flawed, and he's wonderful. And it's this futuristic world that has a lot of dark shades of what we're seeing now. It's been very revelatory in a lot of things that have happened over the past 15 years or so. And so that was and still is my favorite comic of all time. And so I was S Jerusalem on AOL Instant Messenger and a few other things.
AIM. They recently shut it down.
Yeah. So
terrifying.
But yeah, I post a little bit on Twitter here and there. Perhaps I'll have a bit more to say on Twitter in the coming years. I feel a lot of folks are pushing a lot of things that are either very vapid or a little empty.
Sure. And
if I have something important to say, you'll find me saying it there.
I feel like you could light up those spaces. We'll talk about that off the podcast though. But again, Nick, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll do this again sometime.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.